Okay, today we're going to be looking at ancient Chinese social classes. With the social classes, it is very different from the Indian social classes. In India, we had the emperor was not the top. In fact, the priests were the Brahmin class, and then the priests, or then the emperor and his court, the soldiers would be the second. Then it went to the artisans, and then to the peasants. Now, in China, you have the emperor at the top, and then the peasants and farmers. Okay, the peasants and farmers were actually the largest group. So this pyramid that I have here, um, I put the peasants up there because they're the largest group and they are the most respected social group next to the emperor and those scholars. Now, the emperor and the scholars, scholarship was highly regarded in China. Uh, People would study hard to become government officials. After Confucius, he taught that the best, brightest, most educated people should serve in the government. And so people from all classes would study for their exams and try to attain that government position. Now, peasants and farmers, these are the people that do the bulk of the work. They produce most of the food. And so they are seen as the most important group because they actually produce the wealth from the land. Okay, artisans and the people underneath the farmers, they produce goods for daily life. They produce luxury goods, but they are not as important. But they still work with their hands, which is very important. Now, the bottom group are the merchants. Merchants were not considered to be highly regarded. Now, they may be very wealthy, but that didn't mean that they were higher class. In fact, in Japan and China, money is considered dirty many times. In Japan, the samurai wouldn't even handle the money. This sounds very strange because the samurai would just go off and rack up bills and have his wife pay all the bills. And so the structure of Japan, China, with money is a little bit different from how we would perceive money. Now in Europe, you will see some social strife caused by how we would separate people out and how they would have certain groups handle the finances. And we'll look at that next year when you're in seventh grade. Okay, now I was looking pretty hard for a traditional Chinese farmhouse, and I finally just found this one. Now, this one is a thatched roof. Now, typically, the poor people would have thatched roofs, and they might have a courtyard or some place where they could keep their animals. A lot of times, the farms, the villages, you would build your house around a courtyard, so you'd have a fenced yard, and it wouldn't be a very big yard, but it would protect your animals and protect your people. You wouldn't have windows facing out because you wouldn't want people to sneak in and break into your house. And so in the next, I think, couple pictures, we'll see something that might give you a better idea of what it would look like. But they would have a gated courtyard, thatched roof. The walls would be covered with sticks and then covered with mud to keep the wind out. A lot of times the floor is just a dirt floor, okay? If they could elevate the floor, that's where the people would live because the animals would live on the dirt side of the floor. Now, fireplaces would be in the center of the room, and oftentimes the smoke would just drift through the grass, the straw that forms your roof. Okay, it doesn't sound very safe. I'm sure they had a lot of fires. In colonial times in the Americas, a lot of the chimneys were made out of wood that were coated with mud, and they would have a stick next to the chimney. So if your chimney caught fire, you'd knock it over and get away from the house. And so ancient fire control wasn't very great, and you would have places that would catch fire. Now their bathroom might just be a pit dug out next to the house, but you also do have a group of people that will come by and clean those pits out and take the waste into the countryside to use as fertilizer, which may not be very healthy. And like it says there, the animals would sleep in the house with the people that owned them. And these aren't pets. These are your chickens, your pigs, your cows, your goats, sheep, whatever you have that will help produce your family's wealth. Now, this one might give you a better idea, even though this is more about family worship or ancestor worship. might give you a better idea of what a traditional house might look like. You would have typically a gate where you would let people in and out. There's another gate down here. But that is where people would enter your courtyard. Now, this shows a shrine. A lot of families would have a shrine to the family set up on a little table. Um, it's in Japan. It's called Shinto shrines, and in the Japanese house that I visited, you would have a shrine in the first floor somewhere. It might take up a cupboard, and they open the cupboard up and say their prayers to them. Now, honoring the man was very important. The oldest man in the family was the most important person. It sounds kind of strange, somewhat to modern ears, but a lot of cultures in the ancient world would honor the oldest man. In Italy, when we get to Rome, it'll be called the paterfamilias. The oldest Roman man would control the family. Now, in China, this is the same thing. The oldest man would control the family. Women had very few, if any, rights. When the husband died, the oldest man, the youngest or the next oldest man in the family would take control. And that could be a little boy. And so a mom would want to have a son around. Now, it does become fairly sexist very quickly because girls are not worth much in ancient China. When you had a small child that was a girl, that child would be seen as a drag on the finances because you would have to pay someone to take her as a bride. Okay. And so you would give her essentially what's called the dowry, where if I have two daughters, so I would pay someone to marry my daughter and I would give them whatever we would negotiate, but I'd pay them a price to take her. Now, if they ever got divorced, my daughter would get that back, and that's what she would have to live on for the rest of her life. And so it may not be much. So a lot of times, women who are widows, you needed a son to take care of yourself, to take care of you, because the wife couldn't inherit property. The wife couldn't control any finances. Now, when I talked about in Japan, where the wife would control the samurai's money, that is in Japan. In China, the wife had no real way of getting property. And so if her husband dies and she has no sons, she would have to go beg her family, or if she had brothers, she'd go beg her brothers to let her almost work like a slave in her old family house. Or she might find another man somewhere where she would beg him to become a second wife or a concubine. We talked about concubines in a previous lecture. Okay, she wouldn't have the same status as a wife, but she might have kids with the husband or the man. Now, so the man in the family had all the rights. Now, a son was seen as an asset because a son will be able to have a job and support his elderly parents in their retirement when they get too old to work. And oftentimes you'd have many generations living in the same house, okay? Small children all the way up to grandparents. And the daughter of my house, my daughters would go live with her husband's family. They wouldn't live with my family anymore. And so once they leave, they're gone. Let's see, what else could we say about this? It's really sad, but in ancient China, even up until modern days, and I have a few graphs that I'll show you, but in ancient China, there was something called infanticide. Infanticide was where if we had a small baby and it was a girl, at times they would take that girl and leave her outside for her to die from the elements. And it's kind of scary because, there wasn't any real regard for the girls in this culture. Now, boys were highly sought after. Now, we're going to move away from China for a second because I want to show you some graphs. Now, the graphs hopefully will show you or illustrate what the problem is, because even in modern days, boys are still more highly regarded than girls. In modern days, there won't be something called infanticide, but the Chinese will participate in what's called selective abortion. And so if they do have a child that will be a girl, sometimes that child would be terminated in pregnancy before that child's born. Now, here, this is a population pyramid. Population pyramids are graphs that show us the ratio between boys and girls. Now, this is based on China in 2020. Okay, up here at the top, let me get my little pointer up here. Up top, China, year 2020. Now, the zero line runs right up the middle, and you can see it kind of. I didn't highlight the 20 million line, but I did highlight the 40 and the 60 million line on both sides, and this is why. When you get to, over on this side, the vertical axis, you have 0 to 4, 5 to 9, 10 to 14. So every 5 years, you have a group of kids and what the ratio is. So 0 to 4-year-old kids, you have over 40 million. It looks like maybe now 50 million is going to be right in this area here, almost halfway between. So it looks like 45 million kids are boys when they are born in China in the last 4 years. When you come over to the girls' side, it doesn't get to 40 million. Okay, and so it looks like there is about 10% less girls than boys. Now, typically when we have kids, typically we do have more boys. But over the course of time, boys do not live as long as girls, and so they will die off rapidly, more rapidly than the girls. And so by the time you get to be about 20-ish or so, it starts to level out, 20 to 30, somewhere in there. Anyway. Okay, sorry about that. I had a little phone call. Now, so typically girls, there aren't as many when they're born, but they do level out. On the China graph here, okay, even up to age, 15 to 19, you still have more than 40 million boys compared to the girls' side. Now, the girls' side, it looks like it's not quite halfway between, so it looks like it's probably about 37 million girls, up to 30 to 34. So these are people that were born 30 years ago. You're still over 60 million boys, and this is a little bit less than, or just a touch over 60 million. Okay, it's 50 to 54. Okay, 60 million boys, almost exactly, and fewer girls. Now, what is sad is in China, they did have a one baby policy. And so if they realize they might have a daughter at first, they might abort that child and have just a son. And so you have a very lopsided group of people. You have a lot more men in China than women. In fact, in China, I've heard, I haven't watched TV shows over there, but I've heard that you'll never have a show called The Bachelor in China because there are a lot of bachelors, and the bachelors really don't get a choice. You will have bachelorettes because there are so many more women compared to the men. And so they'll have the shows where you have a few women who have a choice, a broad choice of which man they would like to date. Now, another way to illustrate this, okay, this is from the CIA webpage, World Factbook, but this side is the China side, and this side over here is the world side, okay, 0 to 14 years old. And I want to show you in real numbers and also percentages because there's several things we've got to see on this graph. 0 to 14, we have 129,296,339 boys. On the girls' side, you have 111,782,427 women or girls. And so at 0 to 14 on the China side, for 100 boys, you have 86 girls. So they are 86% of the population when compared to that boy side. On the world population, Okay, the average is 93%. So China is 7 percentage points lower when you look at the girl to boy ratio. 15-24, okay, it actually drops a little bit, while the world stays at 93. Okay, 25-54. Now, one thing to notice is these gaps: 0-14 is 15 years, 15-24 is 10, 25-54 is 30 years, and so these are not evenly spaced groups. But 25-54, you have 95%, which is getting closer to the world's ratio, which is 97% of that age. But even up to age 64, they're still not quite up to that world average. Okay, at the world, they have 100% more girls than men at 55-64. In China, they're still a little bit less. I just use the first 3 digits or 4 digits of the numbers to get my averages. You can check those out. But China has, we all have our things that hang on. And so the patriarchy, patri or P-A-T-R, means father. The patriarchy of ancient China still manifests itself. It's still around. But it's still around in our culture too. Okay, that's why we have sexism in our culture, and that's how we can look at wage discrepancies. Perhaps one of the reasons why women might make less money than guys do in our own culture. So, and I did share that little link down at the bottom. There's a CIA World Factbook. It is a great tool for researching different countries in modern times, to see. It goes through the people, economics, all these different things. It's been great working with you guys. Let me know if you have any questions. I'll get an assignment up there for you. I think I know what I'm going to have you guys do. But can't wait to talk to you. Have a good day.